Jim Geraghty, my colleague at the Washington Post, National Review editor extraordinaire, writes the Morning Jolt every single morning. Jim, did you get a chance to review Kamala Harris on 60 Minutes in the Morning Jolt this morning, or were you still despairing over the Jets as I am over the Browns?
What football are you talking about, Hugh? There hasn't been a football season for the
There,
last
there
2
is no
weeks.
season. You're right.
No, that's
There
the
is no
topic.
season.
Yeah, and one of the things that I'm marveling at is that Kamala Harris was a prosecutor for about a dozen years, then became state attorney general for 8 years, then became a U.S. senator for 4 years, ran for president, and has been vice president for coming in like 3.5, going on 4 years. You're looking at someone who, at that time, she must have done hundreds of interviews, maybe thousands, and she's so bad at this, and she's significantly worse now as vice president and as the person who's got roughly a 50-50 shot of being president of the United States. The only explanation is she's terrified, that she's going to have a gaffe, and she wants to avoid the gaffe, and she knows that the more specific she gets, the more likely she is to have a gaffe. So when they ask her, what's your plan on grocery prices? She'll say, bringing down grocery prices is the thing we have to do, and we're going to be focused on doing the thing that we have to do. It's this haiku Hallmark card circular approach that is just mind-boggling.
Jim, I don't know if you're old enough to remember Johnny Carson. Do you remember Johnny Carson?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, there was a shtick.
Hugh,
He'd say, it's bad out there. Okay. He'd say it's bad out there, and the audience would say, how bad was it with Ed McMahon? And so, how bad was she?
You are correct, sir. It was disastrous. I'm only doing Phil Hartman, doing Ed McMahon. But anyway, the look, and there's a reason she did call her daddy. There's a reason she's doing Howard Stern. There's a reason she's doing Stephen Colbert. Is that if you like the question she's tripping on are, how are you going to pay for it? How, what is your economically, like the fascinating thing was with the degree to which the interviewer had to lay out what her plan was, because she wasn't doing it. And it just is this, it is like, it's the third quarter or fourth quarter, whatever, with that sport we don't follow anymore. She's lining up in victory formation with 12 minutes left in the fourth quarter.
No, it's like Deshaun Watson leaving the field on 4th and short, making Kevin Stefanski call a timeout. But let's not bring up specifics about our bad quarterback. Let's talk about cut number 7. This is the worst moment of a very bad interview. Cut number 7.
Groceries are 25% higher, and people are blaming you and Joe Biden for that. Are they wrong?
Stop. Jim, this question, it's like headline, groceries. Fact, prices are 25% higher. Fact, people are blaming you and Joe Biden. Are they wrong? It's like a setup. It's like trying to get someone to pass a course so that they can go on the next year. And here's her answer.
Have historic low unemployment in America among all groups of people. We now have an economy.
She goes on for a while and comes back to her plan on grocery. But I mean, how bad can you get?
There's this reflexive reaction from really just about everybody in the Biden administration that you ask about inflation, grocery prices, gas prices, cost of living, and they always talk about unemployment. Now, the thing, I didn't ask about unemployment, and people are, the unemployment rate has been pretty darn low for much of the Biden administration. People don't feel like it's that hard to get a job. Good for you. Gold star. Good for you. Problem is, nobody feels like they can afford anything. They don't feel like wages are keeping up with inflation, and they can't afford, that's what has them agitated. And so I did, with our Post colleagues, I did a chat Friday, and the jobs numbers came out, and they were nice. They're good. They're the numbers you want to see right before you're running for running for election if you're an incumbent.
If they're real.
But
if they're real,
like high-fiving. I'm sorry, what?
If they're real, they've had to reassess the job numbers for the last year, 3 months later for a year.
Yeah, I still see plenty of help wanted. Like, that's not the problem. And I think I pointed out to my Post colleagues is that we've had a lot of good jobs reports, and people still feel lousy about the economy because they don't think about anything they feel like is going right. They think about, hey, it cost me $50 to fill up my tank the other day. I still go to the grocery store, and it's a new high every time I go and I buy in the same groceries. My rent is up. My mortgage rates are up. Interest rates are, all of these different factors that put people in a sour mood about the economy. And talking about the low unemployment rate doesn't Jedi mind trick them into believing things are going great. And it's fascinating. This is reflexive instinct on their part. And it doesn't work. And it hasn't worked for the past 3.5 years. And they're still doing it. So it is ball control offense. It is try to avoid mistakes and coast along on not being Trump. And maybe that's going to be it might work for them. I think the fact that we're now in October, you have 7 states that matter. You have 7, all of them are within the margin of error. Yeah. Harris can win, but she's got very little margin for error.
I want you to tell me what you think, if you have any idea, the impact of Helene is on North Carolina. Tennessee is a red state. Virginia is a purple state, but it's going to be blue because the folks in southwestern Virginia may be flooded out. Georgia, I don't know that it makes that much difference. They weren't as badly hit. But what about North Carolina? The mountain people vote for Trump, and the Asheville people vote for Harris.
Yeah, I don't expect this to be dramatically changed from the numbers we would have expected to see. But it could affect it on the margins, and it's very easy to understand if somebody's just had their house washed away, and their place of business has been shut down, and they're still deep in the recovery stage. Maybe people got bigger issues on their mind than showing up to vote. Now I know that everybody in those states is going to move heaven and earth to make sure that some of the polling places washed away, but they're going to find the replacement options and stuff like that. But if I were the Trump campaign, I would be nervous about that. And the second thing I'd be nervous about is the degree to which the Trump campaign has effectively outsourced the get out the vote operation to Turning Point and one of Elon Musk's PACs and groups like that. You don't have to look too hard to find Republican veterans of presidential campaigns who are like, these guys are untested. We just don't know how well they'll perform. And I imagine.
Do you remember how Orca failed Mitt Romney in 2012? Orca was highly. Stuart Stevens designed that thing. They paid, rather than do an off-the-shelf GOTV, they invented their own, and it failed within the first hour. So get out the vote. Usually, I just think it could be a catastrophe. But I really don't know how to guess the impact, because Asheville is a deep blue dot, like Laguna Beach of Orange County in the old days, a deep blue dot in the middle of a Red Sea. But the Red Sea and the deep blue dot have been washed away in an epical event. Byron York tells me that the North Carolina legislature is meeting today to come up with something. I don't even know what you would come up with, because you're right. When you've lost everything, you're not really thinking about voting.
Yeah. Now, the good news is that this happened now and not like a week before Election Day. So they have, the remainder of the month to try to work something together, whether it's, mobile, doing it out of a van, or some other moving into, buildings that have come through intact. But no, that's and also look, we have this other hurricane bearing down on Tampa. It's going to cross. I'm supposed to do editors with Charlie Cook today. Charlie's in Jacksonville, and so far it sounds like things are okay. But I don't know whether the hurricane in Florida might affect. God hoping it's not that bad. But these two look, we've seen Superstorm Sandy come along and play a big factor in the 2012 election. Hurricanes have been known to come along and look, when you've just dealt with a devastation and a natural disaster, does turnout drop like a stone? No, but it does. Probably some people who might have been inclined to vote might have just other stuff on their plate at that moment. So I wouldn't be surprised.
Very last question, Jim.
Sure.
I've been asking everyone. I want to get your assessment. J.D. Vance and Tim Walz, vice presidential debates typically don't matter the moment they're done, after the spin room closes. But I think maybe this one, on the margin, favored Trump. I just think that J.D. came off very good in this. What do you think?
Yeah, on the margin, sure. Oh, Vance won solidly. As I mentioned, there's 2 big moments for a vice presidential candidate in a debate. One is the convention speech. The other is the debate. Vance hit it out of the park both times. And I think what was most interesting is the bloom is off the rose for Walz. And yesterday I wrote something and I realized this is the second time.
The rose is like the parrot in Monty Python. That rose is dead.
Yeah. This is the second time in 8 years that a nice guy from a relatively blue state named Tim has been the vice presidential nominee. went out on stage. Every Democrat was expecting him to rip him, and really kind of flopped, and really was not. I went back and I checked the coverage of Kaine and Pence. There were a bunch of Democrats who were really depressed and bummed and felt like he didn't take it to him. Now the interesting thing is that if I ask people, what do you remember from 2016? I have to remind, like, Hugh, off the top of your head, did you remember that Tim Kaine was Hillary Clinton's running mate?
Yeah, because I covered that debate down in Southwest Virginia, South Central Virginia for NBC. But you're right. Everyone thought, why didn't Tim Kaine show up?
Yeah, basically, you think back to 2016, people remember Trump in the primaries, Trump saying that you'd be in jail, the needle on the New York Times website, all kinds of stuff. People generally don't remember Tim Kaine. And so the good news for Tim Walz is that if Kamala Harris and Tim Walz lose, people probably won't blame him. I don't think you could say he's been a decisive factor in this year's race. But also, I don't think anybody's going to be like, oh, we got to nominate Tim Walz in 4 years. I think there will be a sense that he'll be free to go off. And if he wants, I think he's term limited up as governor. He'll be free to continue his career, but nobody will be coming around saying, oh, wow.
Do you know what they're going to say about Tim Walz? They're going to say one thing about Tim Walz. They wish he'd been named Josh Shapiro. That's what they're going to say.
Well, that's the other. Yeah, that is the. I have been beating this drum, and I don't mind beating this drum and arguing that Kamala Harris really botched the first and most important decision because, all the polls in Pennsylvania are neck and neck. Would Josh Shapiro automatically guarantee that she wins? Probably not, but he would. Look, you've got to figure he is more popular in that state than Taylor Swift. I am not exaggerating that. That was in a Philadelphia Inquirer poll. He's got really high numbers amongst Republicans, really high numbers among independents. He is about as good, the best option you had for delivering the state of Pennsylvania. And right now, that could be that's an excellent chance that's a decisive state. And
but you're overlooking his disqualifying characteristic, Jim. He was disqualified because he's a Jew.
They were afraid because, it would upset all the Israel critics, who, by the way, didn't show up for the convention in Chicago. Like we were,
it's crazy.
Yeah.
It's crazy. I don't, our friend John Podhoretz has been saying forever that Joe Biden's team was incompetent. I think they just moved over to Kamala Harris's campaign. Doesn't mean she'll lose. Doesn't mean she'll win. Just means
by and large. Yeah. It's the same.
Jim Geraghty from National Review. Always a pleasure. Thank you, Jim. Follow him on X at Jim Geraghty.